Her heart was racing. The man she loved was standing just a few feet away, about to leave forever. She wanted to shout, "Don't go!" Her lips parted, her chest tightened, but something unexplainable, stopped her. For a moment, the world around her seemed to vanish. The sound of the city dimmed, the shuffle of footsteps, the hum of engines, the chatter of strangers, all of it fell into silence. There was only him. Daniel. His figure framed against the faint glow of streetlights, his eyes cast downward, already preparing to walk away. Emma's thoughts collided in a storm. Should she chase him? Should she confess what had been locked inside her heart for weeks, months, maybe longer? Or should she let him go, let him slip back into the life that had been chosen for him long before she ever existed in it? This moment, this crossroads of silence and possibility, is where their story nearly ended. But to understand how they got here, to understand how two lives so far apart became entangled in ways neither expected, we have to go back. Back to the beginning. This isn't just any love story. It all began with a single mistake. A misdirected email, sent to the wrong person. A small, almost forgettable error, the kind that happens every day. And yet, for Emma Carter and Daniel Reyes, that tiny mistake became the key that would unlock a love that neither could have imagined. It's a story of longing, of choices, of secrets, and of betrayal. But above all, it is a story of love. Love that asked for sacrifice. Love that defied expectations. Love that nearly broke them both. And tonight, you'll hear every detail. From the laughter of their first connection, to the silence that almost destroyed them. From the weight of promises already made, to the risk of chasing a future no one believed possible. This is the story of Emma and Daniel. A love story that began with a misdirected email. Emma Carter was 31 years old when the email arrived. By all accounts, her life was quiet, ordinary, predictable. She worked as an editor at a mid-sized publishing company, a place filled with deadlines, manuscripts, and the endless rhythm of polishing other people's words. On the outside, Emma appeared content. Her colleagues admired her diligence, her sharp eye for detail, the way she could cut through pages of clumsy prose and reveal the story underneath. But inside, Emma carried something else, a quiet longing. She was, by nature, an introvert. Someone who found solace in the company of books, who often walked home in silence while the city around her buzzed with laughter and noise. Nights were the hardest. She would sit by her window, the glow of her lamp spilling over the pages of a novel, wondering if she would ever find the kind of connection she read about but had never truly lived. Past heartbreaks had taught her caution. There had been love once, years ago, but it ended in disappointment, leaving behind a wound she never fully acknowledged. Instead, she filled her life with work, with friends at the margins, with small routines that kept her from feeling the emptiness too sharply. Still, she wanted more. She wanted to be seen, to be understood, to be loved. And then, one ordinary afternoon, her inbox lit up. A subject line, formal and straightforward, revised blueprints for Thursday's meeting. Curious, she clicked. The email was professional, filled with architectural jargon she barely understood, diagrams attached in PDF form, a tone that was precise but hurried. It was clear this message was never meant for her. The sender, Daniel Reyes. At first, Emma nearly deleted it. After all, people send messages to the wrong address all the time. But something made her pause. Perhaps it was the way he signed his name, almost rushed, Daniel. Perhaps it was the small error in the attachment link, like a man who had been too busy, too distracted, to double-check. She hesitated. And then, instead of deleting the message, she replied. "Hello, I think this email was sent to the wrong person. The attachments don't seem meant for me. Just thought you should know." It was simple. polite. The kind of response that should have ended the interaction. But it didn't. Hours later, another message arrived. This time, shorter. Warmer. Oh wow, thank you. I can't believe I typed the wrong address. That was meant for a client. I appreciate you letting me know. I owe you one. Emma smiled. Just a little. And for reasons she didn't quite understand, she wrote back again. That was the beginning. Daniel Reyes was 34 at the time. An architect whose name was beginning to carry weight in the city. He was ambitious, dedicated, and outwardly charming, the kind of man who entered a room with quiet confidence, who seemed to know where he was going and how he would get there. But beneath that polished surface, Daniel carried his own secrets. He had grown up in a family that valued reputation, stability, tradition. His success was not only his own, it was his family's pride, their expectation. And along with that expectation came obligations he had never truly chosen for himself. Daniel was engaged to Isabella Moreno, a woman he had known since childhood, their families intertwined through business, friendship, and years of careful planning. Their engagement had been announced months earlier, celebrated with photos and champagne and polite smiles. But for Daniel, it was not love. It was arrangement. A future drawn for him long before he had the chance to redraw it himself. He wanted something else, something real. But real love had always felt out of reach, overshadowed by duty. Until that day. Until the wrong email found its way to a stranger named Emma Carter. When he first saw her reply, he could have ignored it. He could have simply corrected the mistake and moved on. But there was something about her words, the kindness, the small attention in her tone. It felt different. It felt human, uncalculated. And so he wrote back. That night, for the first time in weeks, Daniel sat awake not thinking about blueprints, or deadlines, or obligations. He thought about a stranger who had taken a moment to reply. A stranger who felt, somehow, less like a stranger than anyone else in his world. It should have ended there. But Emma couldn't resist replying again. And with that, two lives began to intertwine. Slowly. Quietly. But in ways that neither could have foreseen. Most people would have ignored it. Deleted it. Forgotten it. But Emma didn't. And because she didn't, everything was about to change. What began as a simple mistake, a wrong email, grew into something neither of them could have predicted. At first, their exchanges were brief. Professional. Safe. Daniel would apologize for the error, Emma would respond politely, and that should have been the end. But within those small exchanges, something stirred. Emma had no reason to continue writing back, yet she found herself waiting for his replies. Each message was short, but there was warmth in them. A flicker of personality that slipped between the lines of architectural terms and polite sign-offs. One evening, Daniel wrote, "Thanks again for catching my mistake. My client was impressed that I got the corrected file to him so fast. If I'm ever in publishing trouble, maybe I'll send you my manuscript next." It was a joke, a small one, almost clumsy. But Emma laughed aloud as she read it. It was the first time in weeks she'd laughed that way. She replied, "Careful what you promise. Editors can be ruthless." That exchange opened a door. What followed was not a torrent of emails, but a steady rhythm. A few lines here, a thought there, late-night notes written when the world was quiet. They shared fragments of themselves. Emma confessed her love for books, the way stories had always been her refuge. Daniel admitted he admired architecture not just for its structures, but because every building told a story of people, of lives lived within walls. Soon, their conversations spilled beyond emails. Daniel asked for her number, and after a pause, Emma gave it. The first call lasted 20 minutes. The second, nearly an hour. And then, one night, they spoke until dawn. For Emma, this connection was unlike anything she'd known. She had always struggled to open herself, to risk vulnerability. But with Daniel, there was no hesitation. He listened. He remembered details. He asked questions no one else had asked. For Daniel, Emma was a breath of air in a life that had long felt suffocating. With her, there were no expectations, no family obligations, no carefully constructed appearances. He could laugh freely, admit doubts, even confess fears he had never spoken aloud. Something unspoken began to form. Something neither dared to name yet. But with every new spark came a shadow. Emma didn't know the full truth. She knew Daniel was busy, that his work consumed him, that he lived a life filled with meetings and obligations. But she didn't know about Isabella. The engagement. The promise already binding him to another. And Daniel, he avoided telling her. At first, because he feared the connection would vanish if she knew. Later, because he could no longer bear the thought of losing her. Still, secrets have a way of surfacing. It happened one evening, just past midnight. Emma was scrolling through her phone when she stumbled across an article. A glossy magazine piece celebrating the city's rising architect, Daniel Reyes. There was his photo. Sharp suit. Easy smile. And beside him, Isabella. Her hand slipped into his, a diamond catching the light. The caption read, "Engaged and unstoppable, the couple redefining modern design." Emma's breath caught. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled. Each word blurred, each photograph stung sharper than the last. She reread the caption, unable to believe it. Engaged. He was engaged. Her mind raced back through their conversations, his laughter, his late-night confessions, the way his voice softened when he spoke her name. Was it all a lie? That night, Emma couldn't sleep. By morning, she decided she needed answers. They met in person for the first time in a cafe near the river. A quiet place, tucked away from the noise of the city. Emma had chosen it deliberately, hoping the world would feel smaller there, less overwhelming. She spotted him before he saw her. Daniel, seated at a corner table, his hands clasped tightly, his gaze shifting nervously toward the door. He looked different outside of photos, less polished, more human, as though the man on the glossy magazine page was only one version of him. Emma walked toward him. Her steps were steady, but inside, her heart pounded. When their eyes met, silence fell. A silence thick with everything they had shared, and everything he had hidden. Emma sat down. For a long moment, she said nothing. She studied him, the man who had felt so familiar through a screen, now sitting across from her in flesh and breath. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "You're engaged, Daniel." The words landed between them like a stone in still water. Daniel closed his eyes. He had known this moment would come. He had rehearsed explanations, excuses, even imagined telling her before she discovered it herself. But now, faced with her gaze, steady, wounded, his words faltered. "Emma, it's not what you think." But Emma's expression didn't soften. "Then tell me what it really is." Daniel's hands tightened around his cup. "It's complicated. My family, our families, they've known each other for years. Isabella and I, it was expected. It wasn't my choice, Emma. Not fully." Her chest ached. She wanted to believe him. Part of her already did. But another part, the part that had trusted too easily before, screamed at her to run. "So what does that make me?" she whispered. Daniel leaned forward. His voice cracked as he answered. "You're the one I can't stop thinking about. The one I want to talk to when the day ends. The one who makes me feel alive." The cafe seemed to blur around them. Conversations hummed at other tables, cups clinked, the river outside moved in its slow rhythm. But for Emma and Daniel, time hung still. And yet, nothing was resolved. Not really. Emma left that meeting torn in two. Drawn to him, yes, more than ever. But also burdened with the truth she could no longer ignore. As she walked away, one question echoed in her mind. Would Daniel ever choose her over the life already waiting for him? After that first meeting by the river, Emma promised herself she would walk away. She told herself that loving a man who belonged to another was impossible, reckless, and doomed. She repeated the words like a shield. But the heart rarely obeys logic. Days turned into nights, and silence turned unbearable. When Daniel's name lit her phone again, just 3 words, "Can we talk?" She didn't delete the message. She answered it. That choice changed everything. What followed was a season of stolen moments. Their conversations no longer drifted casually between architecture and literature. They deepened. Late-night calls stretched until dawn, their voices hushed as though confessing secrets to the dark itself. Emma found herself waiting for the vibration of her phone, the tone of his messages, the sound of his voice. And Daniel unraveled in her presence. The man who was always composed, always in control, began to admit fears he had hidden for years. His doubts about Isabella. His exhaustion with living for everyone else's expectations. His longing for someone real. They met in secret. Always careful. Always cautious. A park bench at twilight, a quiet corner in a bookstore, a rented room where the city could not see them. Each meeting began with hesitation, but ended with a closeness neither could resist. For Emma, every touch was both a blessing and a wound. She knew the truth of what they were doing, that his life still belonged to another. Yet when Daniel's hand found hers, when his lips brushed hers in trembling defiance, the world fell away. In those moments, nothing existed but them. And still, guilt lingered. At night, Emma would sit alone in her apartment, staring at her reflection in the window glass. She would remember Isabella's face in the photograph, the gleam of her ring, the certainty of her place at Daniel's side. Emma would whisper to herself, "I should walk away. I should end this." But then her phone would ring. And Daniel's voice, tired, desperate, tender, would pull her back in. For Daniel, the affair was both liberation and torment. With Emma, he felt alive in ways he had never imagined. He laughed more, dreamed more, even allowed himself to imagine a future that was not bound by duty. But each time he left her side, he stepped back into the weight of his reality, dinners with Isabella's family, business meetings where her hand rested lightly on his arm, photographs that painted them as the perfect couple. He lived in 2 worlds. One built for him, polished and public. The other, fragile but true, hidden in shadows with Emma. The pressure grew. Every stolen kiss felt riskier. Every whispered goodbye heavier. Yet neither could stop. There was one night Emma never forgot. A night when rain poured against the city streets, and she and Daniel sat together in his car, the windows fogged, the storm muffling the outside world. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked softly, her head resting against the seat. Daniel stared at the rain, his hands gripping the wheel though the car was still. "Every day," he admitted. "And what do you see?" He turned to her then, his eyes heavy with longing. "You. Always you." The words sent a shiver through her, a rush of hope so sharp it almost hurt. And yet, even in that moment of intimacy, a voice inside her whispered, "But he isn't yours. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Their love lived in secrecy, but secrecy comes at a cost. Emma began withdrawing from friends, skipping gatherings, avoiding questions she couldn't answer. Daniel found himself lying more often, crafting excuses that left a bitter taste each time he spoke them. They were caught in a web of their own making, threads of passion, threads of deception. And through it all, Emma's struggle grew. Every time she looked into Daniel's eyes, she felt the pull of a love that was undeniable. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Isabella's face, smiling in ignorance, believing in a future that Emma was helping unravel. Guilt became her shadow. Desire became her fire. And together, they consumed her. Still, Emma couldn't let go. She told herself Daniel would choose. That one day soon, he would break free. That love this powerful, this undeniable, couldn't remain in hiding forever. But as weeks turned to months, one truth became clear: secrets, no matter how carefully kept, always find a way into the light. And the light was coming. The world they had built in whispers and shadows was about to be exposed. Every secret has an expiration date. For Emma and Daniel, that date arrived on an ordinary afternoon, when everything they thought they had contained slipped into the open. It began with a phone call. Emma was at her desk in the publishing office, surrounded by stacks of manuscripts and the steady hum of computers. The day was unremarkable, the kind that blurred into the next. But when her phone lit up with Daniel's name, she answered without hesitation. His voice was low, hurried. "I can't talk long. But I needed to hear you." Emma smiled faintly. Just hearing his voice steadied her. "I'm here." They spoke in quiet tones, fragments of longing carried between them. Words that felt dangerous, but irresistible. Emma didn't notice her colleague walk past her desk, didn't notice the way the call carried just a little too loudly into the room. But someone else noticed. Isabella. She had been in the same building for a meeting with a client. She hadn't expected to see Emma there, hadn't expected to recognize her voice drifting faintly through the office air. But she did. And she noticed the way Daniel's name lit across the phone screen as she passed. Something inside Isabella sharpened. She didn't confront Emma then. She didn't speak a word. She walked away, her expression calm, her thoughts anything but. That night, Isabella confronted Daniel. The confrontation was cold, precise. Isabella was not a woman who shouted. She was a woman who calculated, who wielded silence like a blade. "I saw her today," she said, her tone even. "Emma Carter. Pretty, in a quiet sort of way. Does she know she's the reason you've been distracted?" Daniel froze. His body went rigid, his face pale. He had always known this day might come, but he had convinced himself he could control it. Now, the walls he had built cracked. "Isabella." But she cut him off. "Don't insult me by denying it. I know." Her voice carried no tremor. No rage. Only certainty. And that certainty was more devastating than anger could have been. "Do you think I didn't notice?" she continued. "The late nights. The excuses. The way your eyes wander when you think I'm not watching. I thought maybe it was stress. Maybe work. But it wasn't. It was her." Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. "It's not what you think." Isabella tilted her head, her eyes sharp. "Then tell me what it is. Tell me why my fiancé looks at another woman like she's the only air he can breathe." Silence. Daniel couldn't answer. And in that silence, Isabella understood everything. The next day, it was Emma's turn. She had just left her apartment when Isabella appeared, waiting near the entrance. Dressed with the elegance of someone who never needed to try, Isabella stood perfectly still, her gaze fixed on Emma. "Emma Carter?" she asked. Emma's steps faltered. The name on her lips was unfamiliar, but the woman before her was not. She had seen her face in photographs, in magazine spreads beside Daniel's. She didn't need to ask who she was. "Yes," Emma said, her voice cautious. Isabella's lips curved into a smile, but it was not kind. "I'm Isabella, Daniel's fiancée." The world tilted. Emma's breath caught, her pulse racing. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her feet refused to move. "I thought we should meet," Isabella continued, her voice calm, deliberate. "After all, we've been sharing the same man, haven't we?" Emma's chest tightened. She opened her mouth to speak, to deny, to explain, but no words came. "Don't look so shocked," Isabella said. "Daniel isn't as careful as he thinks. His eyes give him away. And now I see yours do too." Emma's throat ached. She forced out words, her voice shaking. I didn't mean for this to happen." Isabella's smile hardened. "Of course you didn't. That's the tragedy of women like you. You never mean for it to happen. And yet it does. Do you know what it feels like, Emma? To be chosen publicly, celebrated, photographed, only to realize in private you've already been replaced." Emma's eyes stung with tears, but she held Isabella's gaze. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," Isabella replied coldly. "And Daniel will never be yours. He belongs to a world you can't touch. Remember that." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing alone, broken, her heart shattering in silence. The days that followed were unbearable. Emma stopped answering Daniel's calls. His messages went unread, his words drowned in the weight of her guilt and humiliation. Each time her phone buzzed, her chest ached, but she forced herself to ignore it. Daniel, on the other hand, spiraled. He called, again and again. He left voicemails, some pleading, some angry, some desperate. "Emma, please. Don't shut me out. We can fix this. I'll make it right. Just don't disappear on me." But Emma said nothing. Silence became her shield. For Daniel, silence was worse than any confrontation. Worse than Isabella's sharp words, worse than the shame he carried. Silence was emptiness. Silence was loss. He began to falter at work. Deadlines slipped. Meetings blurred. Colleagues noticed his distraction. His family noticed his absence. And Isabella, she watched him with eyes that revealed nothing, but a heart already planning her next move. For Emma, the pain was relentless. Nights were sleepless. Days dragged. She walked through life like a ghost, haunted by memories of stolen laughter, whispered promises, the warmth of Daniel's hand in hers. But every time she remembered those moments, Isabella's face returned. Her calm, cutting words. "Daniel will never be yours." And Emma believed her. She believed it so deeply that even when Daniel showed up outside her apartment one evening, his face tired, his eyes pleading, she couldn't open the door. She watched him through the peephole, her hand pressed against the wood, tears streaming silently. He stood there for 20 minutes, whispering her name, begging for just one chance to explain. Then, slowly, he walked away. It was the longest 20 minutes of Emma's life. And when the echo of his footsteps faded, she knew something had broken between them. This was the breaking point. The love they had built in secret had been exposed. The walls of their fragile world had collapsed. And in the rubble, Both of them stood alone. Daniel, bound by obligations he couldn't escape. Emma, crushed by guilt she couldn't carry. What had begun with a single misdirected email now seemed destined to end in silence. And yet, silence is never the end of a story. It is only the space before the choice. Her secret life could not remain hidden forever. For weeks, Emma and Daniel had built a world of shadows, one where laughter whispered through late-night phone calls and stolen touches sustained them against the weight of guilt. Yet the truth, like water pressing against fragile glass, was bound to break through. It began innocently enough. A forgotten text message, hurriedly sent when Daniel was distracted. A slip in tone during a dinner with his fiancée, when he smiled at a memory that she had no part in. Small cracks that widened as time went on. And then, one evening, the silence shattered. Daniel's fiancée, her name was Elena, was not naive. She had built her life alongside Daniel with quiet determination, and though their engagement had been more of a social arrangement than a love match, she had always believed that his loyalty, at the very least, was hers. When she discovered the email thread hidden on his laptop, dozens of exchanges between him and Emma, her world tilted. Words of affection, fragments of longing, private jokes that made no sense to her, but carried the intimacy of a bond that excluded her entirely. The confrontation was swift and merciless. It happened on a rain-heavy night, the kind of evening when the streets glistened under fractured lamplight. Emma had just returned to her apartment when her phone rang. She answered, expecting Daniel's familiar voice. But it wasn't him. Emma Carter? The voice was sharp, trembling with anger. This is Elena. Emma froze, the sound of her name from the lips of the woman Daniel was meant to marry sending ice through her veins. She couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. I know everything, Elena continued. Every word. Every secret. Every moment you thought you had to yourselves. I want to meet you. Face to face. Tomorrow. The call ended before Emma could respond. That night, Emma didn't sleep. Her mind replayed every message, every call, every encounter. She thought about Daniel's hand on hers, the way his voice softened when he spoke her name, and the promises, half spoken, half implied, that there was a future waiting for them beyond the shadows. But now, the reality of their choices had stepped into the open, demanding payment. The following afternoon, they met. It wasn't in some crowded cafe or neutral public space. Elena had insisted they meet in a quiet hotel lounge, away from prying eyes, away from the judgment of strangers. Emma arrived early, her palms sweating, her heart thrumming with dread. She sat, staring at the glass of water before her, waiting. When Elena walked in, her presence filled the room. She was elegant, composed, yet her eyes betrayed the storm inside her. She sat across from Emma without hesitation. For a moment, silence stretched between them, taut and unbearable. Then Elena leaned forward, her voice low but cutting. Do you love him? The question struck like a blade. Emma wanted to deny it, to claim it was all a mistake, that she had stumbled into something she never intended. But her heart betrayed her. Yes, she whispered. Elena's eyes hardened. Then understand this, you will never have him. Not truly. He owes me. He owes my family. You are nothing more than a distraction he will eventually cast aside. Emma flinched, but she held her ground. He doesn't look at me like I'm a distraction. Then you're a fool, Elena snapped. Her hands trembled as she spoke, but her words carried steel. He will not destroy everything we've built because of a woman who couldn't resist replying to an email. Emma's throat tightened. Shame burned within her, but so did defiance. If what you and Daniel have is real, why would he turn to me at all? The question lingered, heavy and unanswerable. Elena's composure cracked, her eyes flashing with pain. She rose suddenly, her chair scraping the floor. "Stay away from him," she demanded. "If you care about him even a little, you'll disappear." And then she was gone, leaving Emma alone in the hollow silence of the lounge. That night, Emma waited for Daniel's call. She imagined him explaining, apologizing, choosing her despite everything. But no call came. Days passed, and the silence grew unbearable. Each hour without his voice was a reminder of the line that had been crossed, the fragile balance that had collapsed. Daniel, meanwhile, was drowning in obligations. His family pressed him about the engagement. His colleagues whispered about distractions at work. And Elena, wounded, furious, but unwilling to end things, tightened her hold, reminding him of debts, promises, and the expectations of two families bound together by more than affection. He wanted to reach for Emma. He wanted to tell her that she mattered more than all of it. But the weight of responsibility pressed him down. And so he stayed silent. Emma, left alone in her quiet apartment, replayed every memory until they no longer brought comfort, only pain. The laughter that once echoed through their midnight conversations now mocked her. The tenderness of his touch felt like betrayal. She began to wonder if she had imagined it all, if the love she believed in had only ever been an illusion. But still, her heart resisted. Still, she waited. The breaking point came one evening when she walked by the river they had once visited together. She saw couples strolling, hands intertwined, sharing quiet moments of trust and devotion. She thought of Daniel's smile, of the way he had once looked at her as though she was the only person in the world. And then, she thought of Elena's words, sharp, unyielding, true in their cruelty. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered to herself, "He's gone." It was not just the end of a love story. It was the unraveling of a dream, a reminder that sometimes, the heart is not enough to conquer the world around it. The silence between them stretched on, becoming its own kind of answer. And in that silence, Emma knew that the life she had imagined, the one sparked by a single misdirected email, was slipping beyond her reach. But even as she turned away, as she tried to close the chapter, a question remained: would Daniel let her go forever, or would the pull of what they shared prove stronger than duty, stronger than fear? The story teetered on the edge of that choice, holding its breath, waiting for resolution. Silence has a way of speaking louder than words. For weeks, it had stretched between Emma and Daniel, a chasm filled with unspoken fears and unresolved promises. Emma retreated into herself, trying to rebuild her days without him, trying to silence the echo of his laughter in her empty apartment. Daniel, on the other hand, remained trapped in the prison of his own indecision, pulled in one direction by loyalty, duty, and the weight of his family's expectations, and in the other by the undeniable truth of his heart. But life does not allow silence to linger forever. Eventually, a decision must be made. The breaking point for Daniel came on a night that began as all others had in recent weeks: dinners filled with shallow conversation, endless obligations to clients and family, and Elena's quiet, guarded presence at his side. Yet beneath it all was a restlessness he could no longer contain. He would smile at the right moments, nod through discussions, but inside, he felt hollow. The one person who had made him feel alive was now absent, her absence weighing heavier than her presence ever had. That night, after Elena had gone home, Daniel sat alone in his apartment. The city lights outside glittered against the glass, each one a reminder of the choices he had made. He opened his laptop, stared at the inbox that had once been alive with Emma's words. Every line of every old email seemed to whisper to him. He hovered over the keys, tempted to write her, to say something, anything. But fear kept him frozen. Fear of hurting Elena further. Fear of disappointing his family. Fear of acknowledging that love, real love, had already chosen for him. Days turned into nights, and still he remained paralyzed, until one unexpected encounter shattered the illusion that time could wait for him. It happened in the heart of the city, a crowded street where voices blended into the hum of life. He was rushing between meetings, his mind distracted, when he saw her. Emma. She was walking with a colleague, her hair caught in the wind, her eyes turned downward as though deep in thought. For a moment, Daniel stopped breathing. He had not seen her in weeks, yet the sight of her, alive and real in front of him, struck with more force than any memory. Their eyes met, just for an instant. Hers widened with shock, then narrowed with something colder. She gave the briefest nod, a polite acknowledgement of an acquaintance, nothing more, before turning her gaze away and continuing down the street. Daniel stood rooted to the spot, his heart pounding. That single look told him everything. She had tried to move on. She had built walls where once she had opened doors. And the thought of losing her forever became unbearable. That night, Daniel made his choice. He confronted Elena first. They met at her apartment, where candles flickered faintly in the background, casting shadows that seemed to grow heavier as the conversation unfolded. She knew, the moment he walked in, that something had shifted. His face carried a resolve she had never seen before. "Elena," he began, his voice low but steady, "we need to talk." She set her glass down, bracing herself. "You've already made your decision, haven't you?" He hesitated, guilt flashing in his eyes. "I can't keep pretending. You deserve someone who can give you all of himself. I thought I could be that person, but my heart is elsewhere." Her laugh was bitter, sharp. With her. He didn't deny it. Silence was its own confession. Tears welled in Elena's eyes, though she tried to hold them back. After everything, after all the years, the families, the expectations, you throw it all away for a woman you barely know? Daniel shook his head. "You were wrong. I know her better than I've known anyone. She sees me. Not the architect. Not the son with obligations. Me." Elena looked at him for a long time, her pain breaking through her composure. At last, she whispered, "Then go. But don't ever think love will shield you from the cost." The weight of her words lingered long after he left. But for the first time in months, Daniel felt clarity. The cost no longer mattered. Finding Emma was not simple. She had pulled away from him, guarded her heart against further hurt. She had changed her number, silenced her inbox, and filled her life with work and distractions to bury the ache of loss. But Daniel refused to let the silence be their ending. He wrote letters, long, heartfelt confessions he never sent. He showed up near her office, waiting, hoping for even a glimpse of her. And finally, one evening, fate granted him a chance. Emma was walking home late, the sky painted with streaks of fading sunlight. She carried a bag of groceries, her steps slow, her mind clearly elsewhere. And there he was, waiting by her building. "Emma," he called softly. She stopped in her tracks, her breath catching at the sound of his voice. Slowly, she turned, her eyes narrowing as memories and pain collided. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her tone firm, guarded. "I know," Daniel replied, stepping closer, his voice trembling. "But I had to see you. I had to tell you." She shook her head sharply. Don't say it. You had weeks, Daniel. Weeks of silence. Do you know what that did to me?" He winced, every word a knife. "I was a coward. I thought I could bury it, that I could live the life expected of me. But seeing you again... Emma, I can't. I won't." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You don't get to walk back in and undo the damage. Do you have any idea what it felt like to be told I was nothing more than a distraction? To hear that from her? And then for you to vanish, as if she was right all along?" Daniel's chest tightened. He reached out, but she stepped back. "You're not a distraction," he said, his voice breaking. "You're the only thing that feels real in my entire life." I ended it with Elena. "I chose you. I should have chosen you sooner, but I was afraid. Afraid of hurting her. Afraid of disappointing everyone. But losing you, that's the only thing I can't live with." Emma's walls, built so carefully, began to tremble. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to fall back into the safety of his arms. But the memory of silence, of nights spent waiting for words that never came, still haunted her. "How do I know," she whispered, "that you won't vanish again the moment it gets hard?" Daniel took a step closer, his eyes locked on hers, his voice steady. "Because this time, I'm not letting fear decide. I'm standing here, knowing the cost, and I'm choosing you anyway. Not tomorrow. Not when it's convenient. Now." For a long moment, neither spoke. The world around them seemed to still, the hum of cars, the rustle of wind, the distant voices, all faded into silence. It was only the two of them, caught between the wreckage of the past and the fragile hope of the future. Emma's breath trembled as she lowered her gaze, the fight within her giving way to the truth she had tried to deny. She loved him. Despite everything, she loved him. And perhaps love, even broken and tested, was worth the risk. Finally, she whispered, "Then don't let go." Daniel stepped forward, closing the distance, his arms wrapping around her as though he would never release her again. The weight of weeks, the pain of silence, the ache of betrayal, all of it seemed to dissolve in that embrace. They stood there, in the fading light of evening, two souls who had nearly lost each other, bound again by a choice that had taken far too long to make. And though the road ahead would not be simple, though the whispers of judgment, the echoes of betrayal, and the scars of hesitation would remain, at that moment, they were no longer prisoners of silence. They were simply Emma and Daniel, two people whose lives had been changed forever by a single misdirected email. The story, in its simplest truth, was this: love demands courage. It asks us to risk, to step into the unknown, to face the cost of honesty. And sometimes, when we dare to answer its call, it leads us exactly where we are meant to be. Her heart had once trembled with the fear of losing him forever, and his silence had nearly broken them apart. Yet now, standing together in the fading twilight, Emma and Daniel were proof of what courage could reclaim. Their story was not one of perfection, it was a journey carved through mistakes, through betrayal, through choices that cut deep. But in the end, love had demanded honesty, and honesty had finally brought them home to one another. And so we returned to where it began, a single email, sent to the wrong person, reshaping the lives of two people who never should have met. What seemed like chance became destiny. What seemed like a mistake became the doorway to everything. It makes you wonder, how fragile is the thread that ties us to the people who change our lives? How many moments have slipped past us unnoticed, where the smallest decision, an answered message, a glance, a word, could have rewritten our story forever? For Emma and Daniel, that thread held. They stumbled, they faltered, but they did not let go. And though their path forward would not be free of challenges, it was theirs. A love reclaimed. A choice finally made. And maybe that is the truest lesson of all. Love does not promise us ease. It does not spare us from fear, from doubt, from the weight of sacrifice. But it asks us to try anyway. To speak when silence tempts us. To hold on when the world demands we let go. Their story ends here, but the questions it leaves behind are yours to carry. Would you have risked everything the way Daniel did? Or would you have walked away, the way Emma nearly did? Tell me, what would you have done? And do you believe that one misdirected email can change the course of a life forever? Let me know in the comments below. If you've stayed with this story until now, thank you. Stories like these remind us why we seek connection, why we listen, why we hope. And if you want more love stories told in this way, filled with choices, consequences, and the unforgettable pull of the heart, subscribe to the channel and join me for the next journey. Because sometimes, all it takes is one message to change everything.